everybody, it's Lee Caraher, and this is Everything Speaks, where we talk about how everything you do and say speaks for you, if you want it to or not. Today, we're going to talk about being positively predictable. And I mean that in the double entendre way that it sounds. I want it to be positive, and I want you to be predictable, and I want you to be positively predictable. Because that is clarity. Clarity is predictable. Predictability is clear communication. Clear communication is leadership. And with the transitive property that we all learned back in elementary school, clarity equals leadership, equals predictability. I guess there we go. I know it doesn't sound very exciting. I know that a lot of in the media, a lot of leaders get lauded for being disruptive. But with their teams, disruption only comes when everyone's aligned, and alignment only comes with predictability of discourse. So let's dive in a little more. The first thing we need to understand about predictability is, the benefit of repeating yourself, which I've talked about so many times. So we know that one and done does not work for communication. You cannot just say things one time and expect that your whole team will grasp, absorb, and apply what you've said. You need to repeat yourself. Let's just use the number 7 different times in different modes. Send an email, do a podcast, send a text, do a video, do a staff meeting, send another email, do a reminder, put it in your signature. There's lots of ways to repeat yourself on a key point. So when you repeat yourself, people should be able to finish your sentences. And when they can finish your sentences, that means you have achieved the goal of being predictable. Being predictable creates that clarity around focus, around role, around purpose, around why, which allows everyone to sort of put their oars into the water in the same direction, pulling in the same direction to go to the same place. If people can finish your sentences, you have been clear. Well, you're most likely have been clear. The predictability creates that clarity and that psychological safety for your teams. When your teams know how you're going to respond or how you're going to end a sentence, then they can prepare themselves for the work ahead. When they don't know, they spend energy worrying and anxiety, churning, and all that energy goes out the door and not really to the task at hand. And to the task at hand is where we want to put everybody's energy. So if you are predictable in terms of how your team responds, how your team acts, how your team sets things up, then you are in a place where your team can thrive, and then it can adjust. We'll talk about the adjusting in a sec. So the other thing about predictability is that think about a chess game, right? So if you're the king, you can go you know how the king works, one step in any direction, any 90-degree direction. But if you're the king on the chessboard, your team does not want you to start working like a knight, right? They don't want you to sliding across the whole board. And that's totally unpredictable. And they cannot plan their game. Sort of like a football game or a soccer game or a basketball, whatever game, right? Your job is defense. And if you get the ball, then your role changes and everybody knows that. But if you've practiced different plays, you got to go where the play says so, or it all falls apart. It's not dull being consistent. You can create a lot of powers of excitement, a lot of moments of excitement by being consistent. It's also reassuring around the psychological safety point. We cannot underestimate the power of being reassuring in the workplace as leaders. The other piece of predictability is that it creates stability in what we can only say at the best of times is a topsy-turvy world. And we've talked about it before on the podcast. The business world, leaders in businesses have become the North Star for people and for brands and for customers. But your employees are looking to you to know how to act, to know how to respond, to know how to move forward, to know how to process. And as a leader, think about your predictability as the lifeboat for the rest of your team. It's not about being boring. It's about being that North Star where everything around you might be a star. It might be a shooting star. It might be a comet. It might be a satellite. Who knows what it's going to be? But your job is to be that North Star, that leader that can be predicted, whose behavior is predictable, so that people can rally around and move forward together. Also, did you know that people prefer to work for predictable bosses? And I'm going to amend this. There was, and I'll link to this in the show notes, but there in 2019, Fast Company had a story about the fact that people want to work for predictable bosses to the point of being boring. What I would say, though, is that I used to I've had many predictable bosses who were unpredictably predictable or predictably unpredictable. You never knew what you're going to get. I mean, you just never knew. One day you do one thing and you get your butt chewed out. The next day you do exactly the same thing because you can't help it and you get praised. One day you follow directions to the T and you get in trouble. The next day you follow directions to the T again and you get lauded. I mean, we've all had those kinds of bosses that are unpredictable, but are predictable in their unpredictability. So I'm going to say that people prefer to work for positively predictable people, positively predictable leaders who are A, positive, and B, positively predictable in being positive. Doesn't mean you don't have high standards. It means that everybody knows what to expect from you. And what does that mean in terms of being predictable, in terms of being the leader who is predictable, in terms of being a boss? One, you're setting clear expectations. It's about being clear in an approach. It's about being clear in here's how we do things, sharing your information, not having everything to have to go through you. It's about being clear in your approach so that as you move to different projects and different tasks, there is an approach to that task that will yield different results depending on what you're doing, but is clear in terms of the values. So that is clarity, expectations. And then it also requires what we talked about earlier, repetition, so that everybody understands their roles. Everybody understands why you're doing something. Everybody understands the deadline so you can all stick to it and make things happen. Repeating the message is not boring either. It might feel boring to you. Haven't I just said this? Oh my gosh, I think I said this already. I know I said this. I've said this a million times. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Yeah, suck it up. That is the job. The job is to repeat yourself, repeat yourself, repeat yourself. It's like a catchy jingle in a commercial. Find some things, find your catchphrases. Many a double forte are like, focus is your friend, get to know through yes, all those things. If people have a catchphrase that you can pin, if you can pin an action to, then you're predictable and they know what you mean, but you have to describe it all. You have to repeat your core messages so often that your team can, if not singing in them in their sleep, at least they can finish your sentences. How about that? Of course, that doesn't mean that you don't have to change your mind or you don't get to change your mind. Of course you get to change your mind. So how can you be positively predictable when things are going to change? The key is to be predictable in how you will signal your team that things have to change, right? The key is not just to drop a bomb and then leave, or as my friend Ben used to say, put a turd in a punch bowl and then hope no one scoops it up. Got to go in. And so I am changing my mind. You have to signal it hard. Say things. I'm changing my mind because of X, Y, and Z. I have new information or the situation just changed. And based on that, we're going to go in a new direction. Or you might say something like, I know this is not what we planned, but based on some new information, I need to go deep into the weeds here just for a moment, so I can share what I know. So you have all the information you need. I know I usually don't go this deep in the weeds, but in this moment I need to, and then I'll extract myself again. So people need to know that you're going to signal hard when something's going to change, because something's going to change every week. Absolutely. I wish I had a day that didn't change from when I thought of how it was going to be. So obviously we have to be flexible, and which means we're going to have to change, but we need to be positively predictable about how we're going to signal that change, because that is where the consistency comes in. So if Joe can say, well, this is what we're going to do, and if it changes, Lee is going to tell us why, then there's a lot of safety. People just keep plowing forward. They don't worry about what if until something changes. If they're worried about, not understanding why, or something could change without any signal, then you're spending energy all the time, working 3 and 4 different scenarios in your brain so that you're not caught flat-footed. It is not the way to run an efficient organization. Clarity also, with the predictability, is so true in marketing and communication, right? So I'm just talking about it with your team, but those companies who are as diligent in their predictability externally, actually it's probably reverse. Most companies are probably more predictable externally than they are internally. But if you think about it, trust, consumer trust, brand trust is built around being predictable and delivering what you're saying you can deliver, and having their reputation. Reputation is built on repetition. Repetition is built on clarity. Clarity is built on the values, and it all sort of strings together. So being predictable is not about being a robot. It's about being a reliable human being in a sea of people who are unreliable. We call it surprise and delight for a reason. Surprise and delight, which I love. I love surprise and delight. I love surprise and delight for our clients. I love when we use it for our team members. When surprise and delight comes, it is surprise because they weren't expecting it, but it's delightful because it's taking whatever is the predictability to the X degree. If it's surprise and disappointment, you're in hot crap. That's when you're not being predictable. Surprise and disappoint is not being predictable. Surprise and delight is being predictable about celebration and being and celebrating something on top of what is already predictable, if that makes sense. So I want you to be predictable. I want you to be predictable for yourself, and that requires a lot of the planning that we've talked about before, habits that serve you, getting rid of habits that don't serve you. Being predictable requires clarity of thought around who's doing what and whose role is what, and making sure everybody understands it. And then clarity and predictability requires repetition so that your team can finish your sentences and they all can be pulling in the right direction. So we're going to be positively predictable, and we're going to love it. All right, everybody, until next time, I'm Lee Caraher, and this is Everything Speaks.